My name is David Daniel Ball, and these are the headlines for Saturday, the 21st of February, 2009. Arrest me. Captain challenges police after Steve Irwin are searched. Erratic Cornelia Rao arrested in Jordan. Clinton shocks with cold stance on China. Very misleading headline there. Amnesty International and a pro-Tibet group voiced shock on Friday after U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton vowed not to let human rights concerns hinder cooperation with China. So Clinton shocks with being cold to Amnesty International on China. She's quite warm with China. Good bedfellows. Robbo's refurbishment finally scrapped. New data reveals shocking pub violence. Self-snuffing cigarettes to cut bushfire risk. Of course, they could always do other things like backburn. Netanyahu to form Israeli government. Rebels bomb Sri Lankan capital, kill 2. Fire survivors to attend day of mourning. Grandpa says Octomummy needs help. 45 passengers injured in horrific turbulence. 5 dead as plane burns on Egyptian runway. What a waste, recycling sent to landfill. And in comments, nothing could have been done about the bushfires. Don't believe it. There's a lot of talk from the government about how nothing could have been done to prevent the terrible toll of the bushfires. Alan Jones says, don't believe it. Yorkie terrorists from Tim Blair. As during previous conflicts, British subjects at home are supporting their troops abroad. It's just that now their troops are on the other side. British Muslims are providing the Taliban with electronic devices to make roadside bombs for use in attacks against British forces serving in southern Afghanistan, the Telegraph can disclose. The disclosure is the latest in a string of suggestions from British commanders about the connection between British Muslims and violence in Afghanistan. In August, Brigadier Ed Butler, the former commander of UK forces in Afghanistan, told the Telegraph that there are British passport holders in the Taliban ranks. Other officers believe their soldiers have killed British Muslims fighting alongside the Taliban. And last year it was revealed that RAF Nimrod surveillance planes monitoring the Taliban radio signals in Afghanistan had heard militants speaking with Yorkshire and Midland accents. It's the Taliban. How do, Rasulullah? Have you seen our Wahid today? I've heard naught from him since he went down the road to plant an IED. Progressives at play. Andrew Bolt is hit by racist fakery. We have detected in past 2 days a number of new readers or old readers using new fake names, posing as racists and claiming to be my keenest supporters. This is clearly an attempt to produce trumped-up evidence for someone then to claim that this blog encourages racism, when, as you know, the reality is that I'm militantly against it, whether racism of the old kind or the new racism of the left. What madness this is! To perpetrate a vileness in order to denounce it because what you've been denouncing is in fact too innocent. Interesting that this has happened over the past 2 days. Possibly someone is encouraging this kind of thing. A grown man squeals with delight. Transcript of a recent Rupert Murdoch press conference. While it's impossible to be completely prepared for a downturn of this magnitude, we began priming ourselves for a weakening economy early last year. We implemented strict cost-cutting measures across all our operations. We reduced headcount in individual businesses. Where appropriate, we scaled back on capital expenditures. Even on finance terms, we have never been a company that tolerates facts. So, in times like these, we are better positioned to weather this cycle than our competitors. Now, you can see why someone opposed to Murdoch might seize upon that line, Murdoch hates facts. He says so himself, but you'd also see that the line as presented makes no sense. He's talking about scaling back and weathering business cycles and reducing headcounts. And then there's the strange mention of facts. Could he have said something else and been mistranscribed? Something that maybe sounds like facts, but fits with the rest of Murdoch's theme? MSNBC host Keith Olbermann didn't think so. Take a look from the 150 mark and I'll leave that there for you to take a look at. He does an interesting pirate accent too. Olbermann was wrong and it led to an equally painful correction. I've left that link there for you too. He's still doing his pirate accent. Counselling mallet is requested. Kevin's Canberra Counselling Centre receives a new client. Julia Gillard's office was in damage control last night after a staff member inadvertently told a Western Sydney journalist to F off in an email on ABC Learning. Condemned by the opposition as absolute arrogance, the staffer from the Deputy Prime Minister's office was counselled. Join the queue, pal! Kevin Rudd has confirmed that the two senior staff in his office have been counselled for turning their backs on Brendan Nelson's apology to the stolen generations. Kevin Rudd has given a final warning to disgraced Labour backbencher Belinda Neal, ordering her to undergo counselling for anger management after a pattern of unacceptable behaviour. A day after Mr McClellan declared that a Labour government would campaign internationally to stop executions, even in extreme cases like the Bali bombers, a furious Mr Rudd described the comments as insensitive in the extreme, and after declaring he had counselled his front bencher. Kevin Rudd has counselled a staff member after he was made aware last night of an email to his office in late March from the Department of Veteran Affairs warning him a pretend Anzac Day service at Long Tan would offend veterans. The Telegraph has attempted once or twice to discover the exact nature of this counselling, and whether it is conducted by a professional counsellor with a proper counselling certificate and everything, or if it's just some rubbish counselling by someone who fancies him or herself as a natural counsel master. No dice. The government is very secretive about its counselling tactics. We know more about what happens in Guantanamo Bay. As if a mere fine would deter the UAE. Wouldn't happen if they were white. You wonder how child welfare officers could be so astonishingly stupid. Child protection authorities in Western Australia were warned last May that a foster carer of 4 children was working as a prostitute, gambling heavily and using her taxpayer-supplied vehicle to drive to work at a suburban brothel. Where Australia is probably headed by Andrew Bolt. Glenn Milne last January after a government junket to California. The great thing about visiting California is that it gives you a sense of where Australia is probably headed. In the context of the climate change debate, this assertion stands only more so. A year later, the state itself stepped away from the brink of financial ruin early Thursday when the state legislature ended months of deadlock and paralysis which had shut down road projects and held up tax refund checks by agreeing to a budget plan that increases taxes, cuts spending, and borrows money to plug a $42 billion deficit by mid-2010. Howard's row deal. David Marr, veteran Howard hater, catches up with one of the most famous victims of that regime. Cornelia Rao is in prison in Jordan after wandering the Middle East unmedicated for several months. On balance, her family is relieved. They are? That's a change. When Rao was held in and treated by one of the wicked John Howard detention centers after claiming to be an illegal immigrant from Germany, they were far less relieved. Pigs complain of oinking. When John Robertson concedes his own snout and trough government has plans that are absurd, obscene, and a disgrace, why delay an election a day longer? No school means no hope. No more bounty under Captain Bligh. You may think this is no time to launch a re-election campaign. Voter confidence in Labour's ability to govern during economic crisis will be tested for the first time in Queensland, where an early election is almost certain after the Bligh government revealed yesterday the state budget had plunged $1.6 billion into deficit. The collapse of fortunes forced ratings agency Standard & Poor's to lower the state's long-cherished AAA credit rating for the first time to AA. But voters should ask themselves, if Anna Bligh thinks this is the best news she can hope for over the next 6 months of her term, what worse news is she trying to head off by going to the polls 6 months early? Correction, John Gibson did not compare Eric Holder with monkey with bright blue scrotum. Low blow to radiation regulator. The federal government has an agency that regulates radiation that has just had a green cuckoo slipped into its nest. This is what is meant by the long march through the institutions, so that institutions are captured that the public assume to be neutral. The reckless spending must stop. John Roscom on the not-so-new corporatism. Pay that poor terrorist for his jailing. Britain has its own Guantanamo Bay, or in fact its own brainless critics, not just protecting but paying its enemies. Obama's stuttering start. Karl Rove examines Barack Obama's first weeks in the job. A growing sense the administration is winging it on issues large and small. The danger is that what we have seen is not an aberration, but the early indications of his governing style.